Yo. Hey, sorry, I just gotta get my tea situation legit here. There's not enough, there's not enough caffeination for this whole. Oh, great, and my teacup is all fucked up too. That's awesome. That's all good. Okay, which leads me to like the first thing that commuter cyclists, myself included, are fucking up on. And that is, if you want to like do a whole bunch of cardiovascular like exercise to get somewhere or for whatever reason, you're going to run into some of the problems with coffee, and that is it makes you sweat so much you just won't believe it at first. You're just going to be like, where is this coming? You're going to end up like, I would have gone to the doctor and been like, hey, what's going on? If I hadn't Googled it and realized like, oh yeah, fuck, 5 cups of coffee a day is probably 4 too many, right? And it's like, it's like any other stimulant. It's like, to me, 5 cups of coffee is the equivalent of, 1 cup a year ago when I wasn't going, all right, I'll move on to the actual shit. So the first thing that I just keep hearing, and it makes zero sense to me why people are propagating this myth, is most of your braking power comes from the front brakes. That makes no fucking sense in the first place. Well, why you would get more braking power out of your front brakes unless there's more weight on it, or unless there's, our front wheels are not. Anyway, if you push on your front brakes more than your rear brakes, you're going to notice the tendency to make yourself flip over your freaking handlebars. So I saw somebody actually do this, and when we were helping him up, me and this other randomer who came along, he was talking with us about, braking and stuff like that, and how he'd set up his front brakes to be tighter than his back brakes, and how he always pressed harder on his front brakes than his back brakes, because he'd been told over and over again that this is what a smart cyclist does to, increase and improve and maximize their braking power and stuff. I'm like, okay, you maximized your braking power all the way to, a first making out on the first date with the Bloor Street bike lane. So nice work. It was because like it was fucking hilarious. This guy was there was this other guy coming down the bike lane the wrong way, like slowly, carefully, right next to the curb or whatever. He wasn't even really being that sketchy about it, and there's plenty of room in this spot. And then this noob, obviously a newbie, cruising along, like about to go past me, starts yelling at the guy. Doesn't slow down, keeps going at like 35, doesn't slow down, but he's yelling at the guy. And then at the last second hits his brakes so hard, and like he said, he's putting more power into the front brakes. His front brakes are tighter. The whole thing is just set up to send him over the handlebars. And anyway, I'll just get on to the next thing. But put most of your braking into your rear wheel. I don't know where this fucking bullshit is coming from. The next thing is of like under inflating your tires. I think this is coming from people, like for a long time we just pretended that road bikes didn't exist and everybody was on mountain bikes. Everybody thought mountain bikes is like the new type of bike, and yeah, it's the new type of bike, but it's not a replacement for a road bike. We just decided cycling was not going to occur on the road, and so we forgot about road bikes. And then now people are getting back into road bikes, but in this generation, it's all people who grew up on mountain bikes and beach bikes, where you have your tires inflated to like 30 psi or something really low like that, because the volume of the tire is fucking huge. So there's no point in having a crap load of pressure in there. Now, it's the same amount of air, That's the thing. Like the air bubble that you are riding on is the same amount. Like it should be the same amount, basically. It's the same range. Whether you're on, whatever kind of bike you're on, it's just because of that, the air pressure is going to be different because the tire size is different. You don't need to learn any of this bullshit. Just pump your shit up to 70 and stop fucking around. And then when it gets cold or when it gets warmer, then you got to adjust again, because oxygen expands and contracts with changes in temperature. So I always notice when the weather goes from being hot to cold, everybody's riding super low. I pump up my shit, everyone else is riding super low. And that's when I start going up to strangers, like holding my bike pump out and being like, hey, can you just, one of us has to do something about that shit before you get a pinch flat, or roll the tire off of the rim and have a terrible accident. Because anytime you are doing a crazy corner and you are underinflated, you run the risk of your tire actually folding under the rim slipping out, either slipping out or just sort of momentarily kind of running on the edge of the tire. And you can just get into some terrible accidents like that, or just have really weird loss of control that you don't necessarily pin down to your tire, so you don't notice what the fuck it is. But if you are used to mountain bike tires and then you switch to a road bike, remember, when your tire size decreases, the tire pressure has to increase, because you still need the exact same amount of air. That's the key. But you don't need to learn any of this shit. Just at least make sure it's at 60. And the smaller your tire, the higher the pressure. And I know it's hard to read the shit on the side of the tire, but here's a hot tip. You do the old detective trick and take something that'll rub off on it, and then just rub it around the side of the tire, and then you'll be able to, sidewalk chalk or some shit like that, and then you'll be able to actually see the number. And then you might want to just get some white marker or something and fucking color that in, or just mark it up somewhere, because they make them so impossible to see. Not to mention making sure you got the right tire size for your rim size. Not putting not mixing up your 700 millimeter with your 27-inch stuff. And bike shop people are generally really horrible about this. Bike pirates people are generally really horrible about this. They're like, oh yeah, blah, 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 blah. I wear 10 and a half shoes, but I'm actually 11. And it's fine, because my feet are just, it's like Chinese foot binding up in here. It's great. That's what it's like when you're using the wrong, size, and you'll just end up with a shitload of problems. But I mean, when you're new to cycling and you go into a bike shop where you're spending $30 on a new tire for your old rim, and you've got way more selection in the 700s than in the 27s, or they don't have 27s, and they tell you some bullshit like, oh yeah, no, it'll work, it's just the tiny difference in size, it'll be fine. I mean, it'll work depending on your ability to stretch steel enforced rubber, which is just, no, don't do it. Just make sure you get the right size for your thing. And then what's the other stuff? Helmets, getting shitty helmets. If in order to get a helmet that doesn't increase your chance of having an impact to your head so much that it outweighs the added protection in the case of actually having an impact, you have to spend crazy amounts of money, because you have to get a MIPS helmet. And even that is maybe it's overall safer, maybe not. But the helmet is not really your number one accessory. And unless you're spending $300, I really don't think it's worth it from a safety perspective, because it really does dramatically increase your chance of an impact to the head. It might decrease your risk of they do decrease your risk of fracture to the skull in case of an impact, and that's their safety benefit, and that's what that's why people want to use them. But then they don't really, unless you spend crazy amounts of money. That's why I'm saying this $300 mark, because that's where it seems like the MIPS helmets, which is multiple impact protection system or something. Fuck, I probably got that acronym right. the lower end helmets, just like they are so heavy and they're so large that they make your head more likely to like hit the ground instead of some other part of your body. And so it's kind of this balancing thing where like you have to offset that increased chance of impact with like a significantly decreased, with an increased amount of protection in case of that impact, because you are signing yourself up for a higher chance of head injury. So it has to be fucking completely worth it. And I really don't think with most helmets that it is. So I would say like your number one, I mean, most people, the money that they put into a helmet, if they put it into better tires, because a lot of people are hitting the road with really shit tires that I don't even think should be in stores. Like the lowest end tires, they're kind of like the camera card that your camera came with, like, or they're kind of like the RAM that your computer came with. Like it's just meant to get it home kind of thing. Like when you get those super cheap tires, it's like they should be for when you're selling the bike and it's just the bike itself that has value. It's not the add-ons to it and stuff, because tires are kind of a personal choice. Not personal, but they're sort of like per application, I switched from narrow tires to like medium tires, and it's wonderful. I've got like the classic sort of like roadie width of tire right now, and it's just perfect, and it's like round, so it's not like flat like that or super long, and that's great. But if I'm looking to buy a bike, I don't really want to be putting a whole bunch of money into, like, if I'd been buying this and it had good tires on it when I bought it, I would have ended up, it would have been like an extra $100, and it probably would have come with tires that I don't want because they're too narrow for like my application, which is commuting. So there is a purpose for those cheap, shitty tires. It is to get you to the bike shop where the good tires are, and then you keep the shitty tires for when you want to sell the bike and you want to keep the tires. Another big mistake I see, obviously, is like just people not locking their shit up well enough, not using their locks right, and not getting good locks. And there's a billion resources for figuring this out, but basically, like when you get a lock and it comes with a cable, the cable is like the lock still has to go around both your frame and the thing you're locking to, or your frame and your wheel, or your frame and your chain ring, so you can't pedal it away. Like sometimes it's best to, the locks that I recommend getting, like they're just a really good solid U-lock, good locking system with a like shitty cable. The shitty cable is for either securing your wheels to the lock while you've secured the bike to the post with the lock, or it's for securing your bike to a large post or whatever when you've already locked the bike to itself somehow using a really good lock. Okay, so you use your kick-ass lock to go through the chain ring or through the wheel, and then also through the frame. I figured out how to put mine through all three, and it's awesome. But it takes a minute, But I also have like an extra lock just for that, so that I can just add a bit of extra security, and it's like a $15 padlock, but that's a 3-minute lock. It's like, it really, you got to consider your locks in terms of like how long it takes to get off with various different sets of tools, and how it competes with the other bikes around you. But the big ticket item I wanted to emphasize with this video is really the braking thing, the like putting a lot of power into your front brake based on the assumption that that's where most of your braking power comes from. It's like we're not really hurting for braking power as cyclists. Like I'm doing 30, I'm doing 40. I have okay brakes, they're not incredible. They're just they're center pole, canties, and they're awesome. I don't really have to slam on the brakes in any situation. Like there's no, I'm not doing 60 and needing to stop in a meter. And so I don't really get where this whole like quest for extra braking power is even coming from, let alone setting people up for rolling over their handlebars, like it's I mean, I guess since it does send you over the bars, you do have more power, but no, it doesn't. It's just because of the mechanics and physics of riding a bike, you're going to go over the bars. So this is almost also the easiest way to get like a head injury. So especially if you have a helmet, because it draws your head toward the pavement. So I mean, one of the other mistakes is like trying to pick a spot on the road and misinterpreting this like ride in a straight, predictable line thing. What that means is don't be merging in and out of different lanes without checking and yielding. Like you have to check behind you and yield to whoever is about to use that lane because they have dibs before you turn out into some lane. And somehow drivers do not know how to explain this to cyclists, and the people doing the explaining are all drivers, and they've never tried cycling, or they have and they suck at it, and they've never asked me because why would they? They've never found like an actual normal cyclist to ask because why would they? They're just putting together documents because they need to be there, not because they need to say what they need to say. So like the cycling education is pretty shit, and this is one of the main pieces. And so people misinterpret this shit to mean I've got to pick a part of the road and use it at all times, which is like if I had to bike like that, I just wouldn't, which of course is the point. If you try to get people to like pick a spot on the road and just use it and not look over their shoulder and not merge in and out, like I'd be fucked if I wasn't merging in and out all the time, looking over my shoulder each time. So I can't imagine the cycling experience that most people are having, but I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, God damn, like why would you even bother if you're going to be biking like this? So the way to interpret that advice is when you have picked your spot on the road, just use it and go fast so that you can own that spot. Figure out how fast you need to be going in order to sort of be reasonably using that spot without slowing everybody behind you down. And that applies to like cyclists behind you or drivers behind you. If you're using a 40 kph stretch of road at 30 kph, the drivers are going to be doing 20 kph faster than you. So you need to be getting out of the way when they're passing. You need to maintain that throughway. And it's not a joke, and it's not like a cyclist oppression thing. It turns into one, but it's just simply like, just as cyclists on the like shared paths want a throughway in the middle where people generally just stay out of that spot so we can go fast. Drivers want the same thing, and all we have to do to accommodate that is just look over our shoulder. And overall, you can go way faster by using the main lane or the middle of the curb lane or whatever the fast spot is, and then just getting out of it when you can't match speed with the people behind you. It's so much faster. So overall, it's way, and this isn't really vehicular cycling. It sort of is, but it's like when you take vehicular cycling to the extreme of defensive driving attitudes and techniques and stuff, then it really works, and it's so goddamn fast. And the other thing is like trying to obey the law too strictly. Number one, you are not going to be able to figure out what the law is about all the little things that you have to do. So you got to figure out like what the intention behind the main law is, and then try and hack it so that you can accomplish it. You know, usually if you try to on a bike, if you try to bike according to the law, the letter of the law, it sort of fucks up the intention of that law. Like, so you got to figure out like, what is this law trying to get me to do, and how can I do that in a safer way? Because the road is designed to like make it impossible to be both compliant and safe and whatever on a bike. It's just designed that way because General Motors designed it that way back in the day. They didn't want to have to compete with cycling for personal transportation market share. So as part of their induced demand marketing campaign, they set the shape of the roads and the shape of the laws very, very, very carefully to disadvantage cyclists. And that includes like the stop signs that you're supposed to stop at each one of, like none of which existed in the days of cycling before driving. And I don't think they were put in place for drivers. I think they were put in place to prevent cycling, because drivers don't really need to be stopping completely either. Like all of the intersections where I roll through instead of stopping, like with some exceptions where I'm only able to get away with it because I'm using a much smaller vehicle than them or something, but generally, anytime I'm rolling through instead of stopping, the driver behind me could completely get away with doing the exact same thing without any safety risk. So the intention of the law is you can't go through without being ready to yield, checking if you need to yield, and then yielding if you need to. That's the intention of the law. And the reason it's a stop sign instead of a yield sign is just exaggeration. And this is a big mistake that people have made with laws, is sort of like where we enforce 10 kph over the limit. So we set a limit that's 10 kph lower than we want people to drive for the sake of emphasis. And it's just because we're all obsessed with hyperbole and stuff. But we should just be busting people at 1 kph over the limit and just set the limit 10 kph higher than it is. We shouldn't be setting people up with this expectation that the law is always going to be expressed in an exaggerated and bogus way in order to inspire compliance. Like you don't have to pull somebody super, super, super far just to get them to the point where you want them to be. You can just pull them to that point and then not let them go any, so the stop sign thing is really just so that because drivers have a much higher acceleration curve, it's just to shuffle cyclists behind drivers, and it's just to strand drivers at intersections. It's so that cyclists get stranded in an intersection waiting for all these drivers to pass them who are actually going to slow them down, because overall the cyclist is going faster, but we can't get through that intersection from a dead stop faster than the driver. We can from a rolling pace. At a rolling pace, it's all equalized. But forcing cyclists to come to a complete stop is just a cyclist oppression thing. It's part of the framework of oppression, and you don't need to do it. And police are not going to enforce on you for rolling through a thing, except for like bogus like safety blitzes and stuff. But they don't happen very often. Anyways, you don't have to worry about that. And most of the tickets are dismissed anyway when they do happen, like because they are so stupid and it's just entrapment. So what actual police look for in actual normal enforcement situations is they are not going to enforce the coming to a complete stop thing. They are going to enforce the failure to yield thing, which is what actually matters. And this is the only real law that you need to know about, is the right of way. And it's basically just every space that's in front of you is in front of somebody else too. And if they've been waiting for it longer, they get access to it. Or if they're going straight through it, they get access to it instead of you if you're turning through it or something like that. So like, that's it. There's this pecking order. It's not based on who you are, what you're driving, or whatever. It's not even based on how fast you're going. It's based on whether or not you have dibs on this spot. And it's the same rules as if you're in line at the grocery store. So you do not need to do anything special to obey that law. And that is the basic, that's the law that all the other shit is based on, like the signals and intersections and stuff like that. That's what it's based on too. It's just based on like, we want to allow people to just bomb through intersections at 50 kph without looking, which is just dangerous no matter how you slice it. And so we're going to just alternate directions for people being able to do that. And this is like why one of my big primary pieces of advice is, just as there is no real sense in just stopping and waiting for each light and making complete stops at stop signs when there's no right of way need to do so, when there's no safety benefit. At the same time as that is true, there is no real safe way to just bomb through intersections without being ready to yield. So as in approaching slowly enough to be able to check and be ready to yield and yield as well. And also like yield without making the other person slow down. So it has to be a full hard yield. Can't be like where you're sort of like, can I get them to stop so I can go ahead? No. It has to be like, they don't even notice you're yielding so hard. So don't bomb through green lights, don't trust them. Like approach the intersection at a speed such that you can evaluate what's going on and pass through and yield and whatever. And this introduces the problem of people behind you fucking with you, which is another good reason to roll through red lights, because then you can actually do it at a reasonable pace without a whole bunch of drivers pretending that they are going to rear end you and 1 out of 100 actually doing it. Because fuck that.